federal judge ordered the custom truck makers to pay more than $800,000 to the U.S. government as well as Davis County.
Engines roared. YouTube cheered. Audience excited. And at the center of it all stood Heavy D. Sparks, a man who turned diesel fumes into fame and built an empire out of raw horsepower. But behind that confident grin and booming laughter, the cracks were already forming. Long before viral videos, mega builds, and desert recoveries, Heavy D learned the hard way how fast success can spin out of control through family loss, deadly accidents, lawsuits that nearly ended his brand, and a dream deal that turned into a nightmare. So how did one man go from having it all to watching it crumble almost overnight? How did the internet's favorite truck builder become the guy with a tainted reputation? And why do some of his victories today carry a shadow? Let's dive into the heartbreaking rise, fall, and resilience of Heavy D. Sparks, the man behind the machines. Early foundations and personal struggles. Before he was the face of Diesel Brothers or the mastermind behind those outrageous monster trucks, he was just Dave Sparks from Layton, Utah. Born on January 5th, 1985, Heavy D grew up in a working-class family where passion for machines ran deep, even when money didn't. From a young age, Dave was obsessed with engines. He'd take apart anything with wheels, break it, fix it, and rebuild it stronger. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. But at just 21 years old, that determination was tested in the worst way possible. His father passed away. That loss hit him like a truck. Losing a parent that young doesn't just wound you, it rewires you. And for Heavy D, it lit a fire that would define the rest of his life. The pain became his fuel. Every build, every risk, every wild stunt. It was all driven by the memory of the man he lost too soon. College didn't hold his interest. He dropped out after a semester at Weber State University, calling classrooms too confining. Instead, he joined his uncle's construction company where he operated heavy equipment and handled excavation jobs. There, he learned what it meant to create something real from the ground up. Those early years built the foundation for his empire. They taught him that big machines and bold risks could make something unforgettable. Friends remember him as the guy who couldn't sit still, always filming pranks, test runs, and ridiculous stunts. It wasn't just about trucks, it was about entertainment. But beneath the laughs and ambition was a constant reminder: life is short and success can vanish in a blink. For Heavy D, there was only one way forward: keep moving, keep building, and turn every ounce of pain into power. Rise to fame and the birth of an empire. Climbing from local construction to national fame doesn't happen by luck. It takes vision, and Heavy D had plenty. By his mid-20s, he was already customizing diesel pickups that looked nothing like what rolled off factory lines. Alongside his friend Diesel Dave Kiley, they started filming their outrageous builds, trucks with towering lifts, massive smoke stacks, and burnouts that could shake the desert. They didn't just post videos, they told stories. They made diesel cool, and the internet loved it. Their clips went viral, and soon the Diesel Brothers brand was born. In 2016, Discovery Channel came knocking. The result? Diesel Brothers, a wild mix of comedy, chaos, and custom builds that captivated millions. Viewers couldn't get enough of the over-the-top creations or the crew's larger-than-life personalities. Heavy D was the visionary, Diesel Dave the entertainer, and together they made diesel culture mainstream. But Heavy D wasn't content just with TV fame. He went bigger. He co-founded multiple ventures: Diesel Sellers, a marketplace for diesel enthusiasts; Sparks Motors, his custom fabrication shop; and Diesel Power Gear, an apparel company tied to epic truck giveaways. Each business fueled the next, creating a self-sustaining engine of fame, money, and fan loyalty. At his peak, Heavy D wasn't just building trucks, he was building an empire. His name stood for rebellion, creativity, and fearlessness. He also had his sights on the digital world. While Diesel Brothers dominated television, his YouTube channel, Heavy D Sparks, gave fans a behind-the-scenes look into desert recoveries, high-octane adventures, and heartfelt moments. It was smart. He wasn't just a TV personality. He was a brand. A builder, a storyteller, a symbol of grit and hustle. But fame, as it often does, comes with a heavy price, and soon, Heavy D's world would shift from roaring engines to courtroom echoes. What started as a bit of rebellious fun, a thumb in the face of environmental rules, would soon explode into a legal nightmare that almost destroyed everything Heavy D Sparks had built. It all began in 2016 when a nonprofit called Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, UPHE, a clean air advocacy group, decided to take on the Diesel Brothers, Heavy D, Diesel Dave, and their Diesel Sellers crew. Their claim sounded simple, but the impact was massive. They accused the Diesel Brothers of illegally modifying diesel trucks to bypass emission systems, promoting the notorious rolling coal culture, and selling those vehicles to the public. To prove their point, UPHE went undercover. They bought one of the Diesel Brothers' custom trucks and put it through emissions tests. The results were shocking. 36 times more pollutants and 21 times more particulate matter than a regular stock truck. What had looked like harmless entertainment online, huge plumes of smoke, roaring engines, and viral stunts, now look like to regulators a public health threat in a state already choking on pollution. The group filed a lawsuit accusing the Diesel Brothers of repeatedly violating the Clean Air Act, one of the strictest federal environmental laws in the U.S. And by 2018, things escalated fast. A federal judge issued an injunction. Heavy D and his team were officially banned from building or selling any truck that used emissions defeat devices. In a blink, the same wild builds that made them famous were now evidence in a courtroom. Then came the crushing blow. In March 2020, Judge Robert J. Shelby dropped a verdict that sent shockwaves through the auto world. The Diesel Brothers were hit with an $850,000 penalty and permanently banned from modifying or selling tampered vehicles. The judge didn't mince words. He called their actions flagrant misconduct and dismissed their claim that the trucks were meant for off-road use only. It was more than just a fine. It was a reputation killer. Heavy D had built his empire on boldness, rebellion, and spectacle. Now those same traits were being painted as reckless disregard for the law and for public health. Fans were divided. Some saw him as a victim of government overreach. Others felt he'd crossed the line, putting the environment and people's health at risk. And Heavy D himself seemed torn between the entertainer who gave fans what they wanted and the businessman now fighting to keep his empire from collapsing under legal pressure. The damage wasn't just financial, it was personal. This was a man who had already faced tragedy, losing his father at a young age, and now his life's work was being rebranded as dangerous and irresponsible. Heavy D had unknowingly become a symbol in a much bigger fight, the clash between custom car culture and environmental law. And that battle was far from over. Appeals, fallout, and the long road back. For most people, an $850,000 fine would have been the end of the story. Pay it, rebuild, then move on. But Heavy D wasn't most people. In 2021, the Diesel Brothers appealed the ruling to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that the original decision went too far, especially punishing them for truck sales that happened outside Utah's borders. And surprisingly, the court partly agreed. The appeals judges upheld the finding of misconduct, but ordered a recalculation of the penalties, opening the door for a potentially smaller fine. Heavy D's lawyer even predicted the fine could drop from $850,000 to as low as $105,000 if the numbers were adjusted correctly. It sounded hopeful, but hope didn't mean closure. Delays, new filings, and procedural setbacks dragged the case on for years. Even as Heavy D's channel grew and his off-road recoveries went viral, that lawsuit hung over him like a shadow. Every win came with an asterisk. He was still under federal watch. By 2025, the case was still unresolved. A planned garage sale meant to offload equipment and merchandise was even restricted by the court, which placed conditions to ensure it didn't break the injunction. What should have been a simple business move turned into another reminder that his freedom to operate was still limited. The legal pressure wasn't just draining money, it was draining spirit. Every court date, every motion, every news headline was a reminder that success could vanish in a heartbeat. And maybe that's what hurt the most. To his loyal followers, Heavy D became something of a hero, a man standing up to an overbearing system. To others, he was a cautionary tale about how far entertainment can go before it crosses into illegality. But one thing was certain. The fight changed him. It forced Heavy D to confront the consequences of the very defiance that made him famous. Because sometimes what looks like freedom, burning rubber, blowing smoke, and chasing viral glory, comes with a cost no one sees until it's too late. To his critics, Heavy D wasn't a misunderstood entrepreneur. He was a repeat offender who refused to take accountability for the pollution his builds caused. As the 2020s rolled in, he found himself trapped in a two-front war, one waged inside the courtroom and another in the ruthless court of public opinion. And the longer the fight dragged on, the heavier the toll became, draining his finances, testing his resilience, and slowly chipping away at the peace of mind he once flaunted. The financial strain. Legal battles don't come cheap. And for Heavy D, the cost went beyond attorney fees. By the early 2020s, the pressure began to show in unmistakable ways. The clearest sign came in 2022 when he and Diesel Dave sold Fremont Island, an 11,000-acre property they once dreamed of transforming into an off-road paradise. To fans, the sale looked like a defeat, a forced retreat from one of their boldest visions. But to Heavy D, it was survival. A practical move to raise cash as legal bills and potential fines piled up. Yet the sale of Fremont Island was only a glimpse into a much bigger storm brewing behind the scenes. Court documents revealed that Heavy D's companies were operating under strict restrictions, choking off some of their most profitable ventures. The injunction from the emissions case made entire categories of truck builds off limits. Every new project now faced scrutiny, slowing down production, eating away at profits, and suffocating the once thriving machine of diesel sellers. Then came the next hit, one that made the emissions fine look small. In 2024, Heavy D was hit with another devastating blow, the Diesel Power Gear trademark lawsuit. After years of disputes with an Idaho-based company over the brand name, a judge ruled against Heavy D and ordered him to pay a staggering $11.8 million in damages. It was a jaw-dropping figure, nearly 14 times larger than the emissions penalty. Even loyal fans couldn't help but wonder, could even a YouTube empire survive that kind of hit? Sure, there were whispers that appeals might reduce the final amount, but when you stacked it all up, the sale of Fremont Island, the $850,000 emissions fine, and the new multi-million-dollar judgment, it painted a grim picture. The man once seen as untouchable was now scrambling to protect what was left of his empire. Reports of equipment auctions and asset liquidation started surfacing. Heavy D, who once built his reputation on wild, no-limits adventures, was now selling off pieces of his dream to stay afloat. Even his YouTube content began to shift. The massive custom builds that once defined his brand gave way to recovery missions and storytelling videos, creative pivots that felt more like survival strategies than artistic choices. But behind the creative pivot was a painful truth. The old way of doing business was no longer sustainable. For a man who built his identity on boldness and freedom, these new limitations felt like chains. Every financial move, every creative decision was now dictated by lawyers, judges, and settlements. There were no viral payoffs this time, just endless paperwork, legal negotiations, and sleepless nights. But perhaps the real loss wasn't financial. It was emotional. The freedom that had driven Heavy D since his father's passing, the independence he fought so hard to build, was slipping away. What had started as a story of boundless ambition was turning into a sobering lesson about the dangers of chasing too far, too fast, for too long. The personal toll: family, health, and image. Behind every lawsuit and fine was a man trying to keep his personal world from falling apart. Heavy D's public persona had always been larger than life, a confident leader who turned every challenge into content. His charisma made fans believe he was unstoppable. But over time, the cracks began to show. Friends and longtime viewers noticed subtle changes. The wild stunts grew fewer, the truck builds less frequent. His videos leaned more toward recovery stories and lifestyle moments, creative pivots that felt more like survival strategies than artistic choices. Family had always been at the heart of Heavy D's story, but as the financial and legal pressures mounted, even that part of his life began to feel the strain. The once unshakable man who had built an empire from grit and ambition was now visibly burdened, carrying a weight no audience could fully see. In the end, Heavy D's saga became more than just a tale of trucks, fame, and YouTube glory. It was a story about the cost of chasing freedom in a world that always demands payment. A reminder that even the boldest dreamers aren't immune to the crash that comes after pushing too hard, too fast, for too long. He often talked about how losing his father at just 21 years old changed everything for him. That loss became the fire that fueled his drive, the reason he worked like a man possessed. For Heavy D's success wasn't just about fame or fortune, it was about control. Control over his destiny, his business, his finances, and maybe in some way control over the chaos that life had thrown at him so early on. But as the years went by, that control began to slip through his fingers. The multi-million-dollar lawsuits, the endless court hearings, the media storm, all of it was chipping away at the foundation he'd built. Behind the cameras and the loud engines, there was a man carrying an invisible weight, the pressure to protect his family, his empire, and his reputation. And then came the whispers, rumors about his health and burnout. Fans began to wonder how much the constant stress was really taking out of him. He brushed it off with his trademark grin, but in interviews, Heavy D admitted to sleepless nights and the constant struggle of living life under public scrutiny. When your entire livelihood depends on your image, even the smallest crack can feel like a collapse. The battle wasn't just in court anymore. It was in the headlines. Once hailed as a symbol of American grit and ingenuity, Heavy D had become a polarizing figure. To his fans, he was a hero standing up to government overreach. To his critics, he was a reckless rule breaker who crossed the line. Either way, he'd lost control of the story. Every court decision, every sale of property, every post online became a chapter in what many saw as a public downfall. But the real tragedy wasn't just legal or financial, it was personal. Heavy D had spent his life fighting to build something lasting, and now he was forced to watch that legacy become the center of a storm. For a man who defined himself by his ability to overcome loss, this was a different kind of battle, one that couldn't be won with horsepower or hustle alone. Legacy and ongoing uncertainty. The road ahead for Heavy D remains uncertain. The lawsuits are still unresolved, the financial strain lingers, and the debate around his reputation is far from over. Yet one thing no one can deny is his impact on automotive culture. From the early Diesel Brothers days on the Discovery Channel to his viral YouTube success, Heavy D reshaped how the world saw diesel trucks. He made them cool, exciting, even cinematic. He didn't just build machines, he built moments. His charisma turned mechanical chaos into storytelling, and his videos made millions of people feel like part of the adventure. Love him or hate him, Heavy D made sure his presence couldn't be ignored. But legacies are rarely simple. For every fan who calls him a pioneer, there's a critic who sees a cautionary tale. Maybe both are right. His story isn't just about engines and fame, it's about ambition, risk, and the cost of chasing control in a world that refuses to be controlled. And for what comes next, that part of the story hasn't been written yet. Maybe he'll rise again, rebuild, and prove the doubters wrong. Or maybe the weight of the past will keep him grounded. Either way, Heavy D's journey stands as a reminder that behind every roaring engine, there's a human story. One of loss, drive, and the relentless pursuit of redemption. So, what do you think? Has Heavy D's story become a tragedy, or is this just another chapter before the comeback? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories just like this one.